Hi, this is Aaron Reed, and today we're going to talk about the new HR and how it ties back to employee engagement within a workforce. We'll start by taking a look at the historics of HR as we walk through the different models in place. We'll start with the late 1800s, in which we existed solely to find a body to fill a position, moving on through the early to mid 1900s, in which we were personnel and record management functionality, up until the late 1900s, in which we began creating a better employee experience as we shifted from the personnel and record management to a more HR management approach. Towards the end of the 1900s, we realized that while we do have a more hands-on approach through HR management, we needed to take a more strategic approach to the business. And it was during the early 2000s that we first introduced strategic HR management. Taking a look at the graphic here, we'll start with the left-hand side where we see that it was a low organizational scope for the HR department, and we'll identify from the 1890s up through the early 1940s. During this period, we were responsible for just finding an able body to fill a position. Because most of the positions were very heavily manual labor, there was many positions available, and at that time it was just finding the bodies to fill the positions. Once we'd found the bodies, we were required to pay the able bodies for the work performed. However, there was a lack of labor laws, so safe workplace was rarely a concern of the HR department or the company as a whole. Because of this hands-off approach to employees, there was very low levels of employee engagement, and we often saw high turnover rates within the organizations. Moving on to after World War II up until about 1980s, we became known more as a personnel management role. We also saw our organizational scope increase from the hands-off approach previously mentioned. Starting in the 1940s, we became primarily responsible for personnel and record management. We were primarily still paper pushers. However, that's because it was our literal job function to process the paperwork for the employees in order to maintain a record and file for them within the organization and to continue their career should they choose to leave our workforce. We were focused heavily on primarily on compensation for the organization. That's because we still had a limited business scope within the organization. Because of this still slightly hands-off approach, we continued to see low engagement levels of employees. However, we did see higher retention rates than the more labor-intensive positions of previous periods. Continuing again through the graphic we see here towards the right-hand side, that as we move on through the eras, we also see an increase in the organizational scope. Moving on into HR management, starting in the 1980s, we see that there was a progressive shift towards HR management. During this period, we started creating safer and better work environments for our employees. By doing so, we better understood what motivated our employees, and by increasing those motivations, we created a more efficient employee for the company and the workforce as a whole. As we began to notice that our employees were no longer just a body able to fill a position, but instead a valuable resource, we saw that increase in employee engagement within the organization. With the increase of employee engagement, we also saw that it was time to increase or come up with a model in which we were able to tie back performance to advancements. And this is where we see that things like performance management systems come heavily into play for reward systems and promotions. Additionally, HR began to take on the development of talent within the organization under this HR management model. Previously, it had been up to the HR department to find the talent pipeline, but relied solely on the management of the department in order to progress and develop the talent within the organization. Moving on to HR and strategic HR management, we see that we became a business partner. No longer were we just the paper pushers, but now we're the ones helping drive and make those decisions. And our decisions are based heavily on the information we hold within our human resource information systems, and the data analysis is completed because of that information. We also see a transition within many organizations from HR into people teams or people operation teams. This creates a more approachable value for the employees within the workforce. The people or HR teams also began focusing more on creating a stronger value for human capital. This is done through things like employee engagement surveys, creating a strong culture, and developing and retaining the top talent for the company. By creating this strong human capital value, we also create a stronger bottom line for the company. Taking a look at this graphic here, we'll see that on the left-hand side, our timeline starts at approximately the same time we see the introduction to HR management, and it ends up with the current date where we're in that strategic HR management. As we see the lower impact of employee satisfaction due to the hands-off approach still during the early HR management functions, We also see an increase of commitment and satisfaction as the era progresses into that strategic HR management approach, ending with a high level or higher level of sustainable engagement in which employees feel that they're valued and have the resources available to do the best work available to them and the company. So what's next for HR? We need to identify why we have a plateau within employee engagement. While we had a strong increase for the last 40 years, we have seen a slight plateau in the last 5 years leading up to current, where employee engagement has maintained stagnant at approximately 33%. We also need to understand how we can continue to hold a seat at the table in order to have a voice for our employees. That loss of voice would be detrimental to the company and would result in less employee engagement, causing a downfall in productivity for the company. We also must keep up with the technology in play. It's up to us to create new initiatives for the company, and by doing so, we must have the right technology to support our decisions. All of this ties back to us maintaining relevance. In order to do so, we need to have more continuing education opportunities, such as the ones we're taking part of with the HR Data Analytics Certificate. And by creating more value for us as the HR department, we avoid outsourcing of our HR functionality. While outsourcing the HR administrative functions may seem a good idea at first, it also creates an opportunity in which the employees don't have that hands-on approach for any issues they may have. It's up to us as the HR department to create the value for the employees. If we fail to do so, we will see a decrease in employee engagement again, and we'll lose our seat at the table.